Staring out her bedroom window into the dead of night, a terrified young woman spots a chilling sight. A tall, shadowy figure marching with an unnatural, locked posture directly toward her friend's house across the street. Witnessing the man shatter a glass window to climb inside, she doesn't hesitate. Sprinting across the desolate lawn, she forces her way through the broken glass, desperate to save him. Paralyzed with fear as she creeps up the wooden stairs, she discovers the entity has completely shapeshifted into the boy's half-naked mother. Standing before his bedroom door, the macabre imposter begins to knock. Shouting at the top of her lungs, the girl begs her friend to keep the door shut. However, just as the words leave her mouth, the lock clicks, the door swings open, and the sinister figure unleashes a blood-curdling assault, claiming its prey in a flash of unspeakable horror. The chilling narrative begins with a young woman who appears completely unhinged, frantically running out of a suburban house. Glancing over her shoulder with eyes full of absolute dread, she ignores her confused father's calls, scrambles into her car, and speeds away into the dark abyss. Little did anyone know, her desperate flight would be entirely in vain. The very next morning, the horrific aftermath is revealed. The girl's lifeless body is discovered on a desolate seaside beach, mangled beyond recognition and resting in a twisted, unnatural position. Shifting the focus a few months later, the scene introduces a young woman named Jay, who is out on a seemingly normal date with a man named Hugh, sitting in the dimly lit movie theater. The atmosphere is calm until Hugh suddenly freezes. Pointing frantically at the entrance door, he claims an inexplicable girl in a yellow dress is standing right there, staring at them. Squinting into the darkness, Jay confesses she can't see anything at all. Sensing an unseen terror, Hugh abruptly ends the date, grabbing her hand and hurrying out of the building. Hoping to salvage the evening, the pair drives to a quiet diner. Engaging in an intimate conversation, they remain completely oblivious to a creeping danger. Outside the window, a towering man is slowly and coldly walking directly toward them. Having consummated their date with a passionate encounter in the back seat, Jay finally relaxes, completely unaware of Hugh's shifting demeanor. Taking advantage of her vulnerable state, Hugh suddenly covers her mouth with a chemical-soaked napkin. Gasping for air, she is swiftly rendered unconscious. Waking up in a suffocating daze, Jay finds herself firmly tied to a rusted wheelchair inside an abandoned, decaying industrial building. Standing before her, Hugh offers a hollow apology, urging her to remember his next words carefully. It turns out, during their intimate moment in the car, he passed a lethal supernatural curse onto her. Explaining the grim mechanics of this entity, he warns that it is a shapeshifter. It might look like someone she loves, or a complete stranger hiding in a crowded room. Pushing the wheelchair to the very edge of the open floor, he points toward the courtyard. Looking down, Jay spots a woman with a chilling, locked gaze, slowly marching in her exact direction. Hugh lays down the ultimate rule: she must always run, and eventually, she must pass the curse over to another person to buy herself time. Realizing the relentless woman is drawing closer, Hugh pulls Jay back, rolls her out of the factory, and drives her straight home. Stopping abruptly in her front yard, he dumps her battered body onto the grass and speeds off. Spotting her in this abysmal state, her loyal friends Paul, Kelly, and others rush from the porch to help her up. Soon after, the local police arrive to question her, but Jay remains too traumatized to articulate the impossible truth. Attempting to resume her normal routine the next day, Jay sits quietly in a college classroom. Glancing out the large window, her blood runs cold. An old lady dressed entirely in white is slowly walking toward the building, her eyes locked dead onto Jay. Packing her bags in a frantic rush, she abandons the lecture. However, as she navigates the crowded school hallway, she turns around, only to see the same old woman now just a few feet away. Facing such an impossible reality, Jay sprints for the exit doors. Seeking refuge, she drives straight to Paul and Kelly's workplace. Sitting with her friends, she details the harrowing encounter, confessing she couldn't even finish her class. Hearing her desperate plea, Paul assures Jay they will stay at her house that night to keep her safe. As darkness falls, another friend named Dora joins the group, turning the house into a makeshift fortress. Wandering into the living room, Jay sits comfortably with Paul, trying to distract her mind by discussing fond childhood memories. But the illusion of safety is shattered when a deafening glass-breaking noise echoes from the kitchen. Leaving Jay alone in the oppressive silence, Paul goes to investigate. He returns moments later, claiming a stray ball broke the window, and heads upstairs to warn the girls. Mustering every ounce of courage, Jay steps into the kitchen to see for herself. What she finds nearly makes her heart stop. Standing amidst the broken glass is a tattered, nightmarish stranger, slowly stepping toward her. Reacting on pure survival instinct, she sprints upstairs and securely locks her bedroom door. Hearing the familiar voices of Paul and Kelly knocking, she cautiously lets them in. Just as she begins explaining the terrifying intruder, another heavy knock hits the door. Arming himself with a mop handle, Paul slowly opens it, only to find Dora standing there. However, at this exact moment, a towering giant shadow breaches the doorway behind them. Sensing imminent doom, Jay shoves past her friends, runs out of the house, hops onto a bicycle, and pedals frantically into the night. Reaching a desolate, unlit park, she drops the bike and collapses onto a swing. Just as she attempts to catch her breath, her friends finally catch up to her, accompanied by a neighborhood boy named Greg. Questioning the chaotic scene, Greg asks if they have contacted the police about the break-in. Refusing to ever return to that house, Jay spills the entire story regarding the curse and demands they visit Hugh's residence. Trusting her urgency, Greg agrees to drive the group. Arriving at the provided address by morning, the group carefully steps inside. Surveying the bizarre interior, they find the house completely empty, the windows blacked out with old newspapers, and strange makeshift alarms made of soda cans strung across the hallways. Searching the rooms, they finally spot a high school photograph of Hugh posing with a young woman. Realizing he was living under a false identity, the group heads to the local high school. After a brief conversation with the principal, it turns out the boy's real name is Jeff Redmond. Opting to handle this themselves, rather than involving the police, they drive directly to his actual home. Pulling up to the new location, Jay knocks on the door, and Jeff's mother politely invites them inside. Cornering Jeff in the backyard, the group demands. Facing their anger, Jeff reveals a horrifying truth. He isn't safe, either. Explaining the cyclical nature of the curse, he states that if the entity kills Jay, it will march straight back to him. If it manages to kill him, it will revert to the girl who originally passed it to him. He coldly advises Jay to pass the curse to a clueless guy, noting that the creature will never sprint, it will simply walk at a relentless pace until it reaches its target. Returning home with this heavy burden, the group tries to strategize. The next morning, Greg retrieves a firearm from his storage room and begins teaching Jay how to properly shoot. Slowly getting the hang of the recoil, Jay feels a fleeting sense of empowerment. Seeking a brief moment of peace later that day, the group relaxes on chairs by the seaside. Little do they know, the stranger is steadily approaching from behind. Grabbing Jay mercilessly by her hair, Paul blindly swings his chair at the invisible force, but is effortlessly thrown aside. Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, the group flees toward the nearby storage shed. Drawing the weapon with trembling hands, Jay fires a poorly aimed shot, miraculously striking the creature in the neck. But to their sheer horror, it stands right back up seconds later. Barricading themselves inside the house, they wait in suffocating silence. Suddenly, a giant shadow passes the window, and a heavy impact smashes a massive hole straight through the front door. But a wave of awkward relief washes over them when they realize it is only Greg, who had stepped out to relieve himself during the panic. Ashamed, Greg tells them to stay put and runs off to find help. Peeking through the shattered wood of the door, Jay is met with the blood-curdling sight of a pale child's head staring back at her. Fleeing out the back exit, she sprints toward her car. Glancing back, she watches the child morph seamlessly into an adult woman. Leaving her friends behind, in a frantic panic, Jay speeds down the road. Blinded by fear, she swerves to avoid an oncoming truck, resulting in a devastating car crash. Waking up in a sterile hospital room, Jay finds her loyal friends asleep in the chairs beside her. Only Greg is awake, watching over her. Realizing she has no other viable options for survival, she and Greg engage in a quiet, desperate act of intimacy, right there in the hospital bed, successfully transferring the curse. A few days later, Greg visits Jay's house to check on her recovery. Paul asks if the entity has shown up. Displaying a foolish sense of confidence, Greg claims the coast has been completely clear for 3 days. With Jay still recovering, he heads back to his own home. Meanwhile, that very night, Jay stares out her bedroom window into the quiet street. Her heart sinks into her stomach. A tall man is marching with that unmistakable locked posture. After the stranger shatters the window to climb inside, Jay sprints across the lawn, jumping through the broken glass to save him. Paralyzed with fear upon reaching the second floor, she sees the entity, now disguised as Greg's mother, knocking on his door. Despite her frantic screams, warning him to stay back, Greg opens the door, and the imposter ruthlessly finishes him off. Having witnessed the demise of her friend, Jay knows the curse is now actively hunting her once again. Sprinting back downstairs, she jumps into her car and drives far away from the suburbs. Waking up despondent on the roof of her car, the next morning, she stares out at the marina. Spotting a group of teenage boys having fun on a small motorboat, she makes a grim decision. Stripping off her clothes with a heavy heart, she wades into the freezing water toward the boat, intentionally choosing to pass the burden to a complete stranger. Returning home completely soaked, she is confronted by a heartbroken Paul. Desperate to protect her, he begs Jay to pass the curse to him. Refusing to put him in harm's way, Jay expresses deep remorse over Greg's fate, admitting she only passed it to him because he didn't seem afraid. Listening to her guilt, Paul reveals he has a definitive plan to stop the monster. Trusting his resolve, Jay finally agrees. Loading up the car with heavy electrical appliances, the group sets out. Before leaving the driveway, Jay spots the stranger standing motionless on a nearby roof, but intentionally ignores it, needing the creature to follow them. They arrive at an abandoned indoor pool facility, breaking in through the rusted iron fences. Wiring up the appliances, they line the edge of the deep pool with the deadly electronics. Wading into the center of the water, Jay waits patiently for the inevitable. Sure enough, the entity tracks them down. Jay frantically points toward the empty doorway to guide her friends. However, throwing a wrench in their carefully laid trap, the invisible force begins grabbing the heavy appliances and hurling them directly at Jay in the water. Fortunately, the devices are all unplugged. Dodging the incoming projectiles with sheer luck, Jay keeps her distance. Acting swiftly, Kelly tosses a heavy blanket over the invisible menace, successfully revealing its terrifying silhouette. Seizing the opportunity, Paul raises his gun and fires a precise shot, sending the creature plummeting into the deep end. Jay attempts to swim to safety, but the submerged monster violently grabs her leg, pulling her under. Firing mercilessly into the auto, Paul lands a fatal blow. The grip releases, and Jay scrambles onto the concrete edge as the pool water slowly turns a deep, macabre shade of crimson. Exhausted and seeking genuine connection, Jay finally agrees to pass the curse over to Paul. In the final scene, the two are shown strolling down the sidewalk hand in hand, looking toward a hopeful future. However, little do they know, the horror is far from finished. Trailing far behind them, completely unnoticed by the couple, the chilling stranger is slowly and relentlessly marching in their exact direction. And this time, it is wearing the exact same clothes as Paul.